Good afternoon. My name is Scott Redler, Chief Strategic Officer at T3Live.com. Welcome to today's recap and look ahead. So pretty quiet day. Pretty, I would say, inside action across the board, which some would deem healthy. And there's always some divergences to worry about. You know, all day long you heard about Janet Yellen talking about the risks to the economy, but things are kind of balanced. She wasn't overly hawkish, but she wasn't like she was, dovish. But it wasn't like she was hawkish either. You know, very mixed day for stocks. Some things, you know, gave you good trades to the downside. Some, you know, just small trades here and there. And I talked about the potential of some different type of action in high beta tech, and there were a few opportunities there. Let's just quickly go through the indices. First things first. If you look here at the S&P, you will see that, you know, here is your, you know, your little red dog reversal last Thursday. You know, you did clear this spot on Monday, and here we are today. You know, not you know, blockbuster action, not big time moves. I think we're actually a little bit lower than that into the close, but you know, kind of, you know, making its way. We'll see what happens, you know, come Friday. The Qs, which have been lagging, are getting tight again, so it's kind of interesting. Okay, here, you know, you had this close on the lows Friday, so kind of like an overthrow low, and then, you know, you had your little failure into resistance yesterday, but then now it's getting really tight again. Kind of tight the way it was here. So if the S&P is going to break above 2100 after we get the Remain versus Brexit, you would think that that the Qs you know, take out this spot. Okay, so we'll see what happens. So far, semi-constructive, but overall still lagging. You know, if you look here, you still have the 2016 high here, and we made a lower high when you had the spiders, you know, make that, you know, false breakout, which was right there. So here, remember when the spiders made a new high, Qs did not. Then you've had a pullback, and as of now, this also is semi-constructive, where, you know, you're seeing an inside action. You know, yesterday gapped up and faded down. Today held the gap. And then, you know, maybe tomorrow another inside day, and then perhaps you do see some better traction. In stock action world, I talked about high beta tech, what could happen today. Netflix, bear flag, talked about shorting it below 93.60, 93. Some of you guys had a lot of success here. You know, you're allowed to short stocks also. You know, basically, stock was getting controlled here by the 8 and 21 day, broke below this spot, boom. What do you have here? You have a bear flag. Here's your pull, here's your flag. Pushed to the downside, you know, not looking healthy at all. You know, I did say, you know, maybe just like last time, just take a little care maybe tomorrow not to take home a lot short, because last time you had this lower level move, a lot of guys made some decent money shorting it down here, but then they caught them. So I'm not saying, yeah, you know, it's going to be a catch, but, you know, basically from 104 down here, nice little follow through move, you know, for those today. So if you took some home short overnight, just make sure you don't ruin your day if it retraces up. To me, you know, Google still having a lot of trouble. You know, you know, I have such mixed signals in my head on what could happen moving forward. You know, can we take out 2100 and go? If we're going to take out 2100 and go, you know, I don't think that this Google is going to break 700 to the downside. But, you know, maybe we don't do that. You know, so some are looking at this as, you know, you have a left shoulder here, a head, a right shoulder that just rounded down. Okay, you have a big gap here. You also have an ascending channel that broke to the downside. So this would be a pretty big downside break. So Netflix showing weakness. Google not acting very well. You know, last time it also, I'll tell you though, was down here. You know, made a little bit of a lower level flag and rallied. So we'll see what happens in the next session or so. Overall though, not looking healthy. Below all moving averages, flirting with the 200 day. This stock has not been below the 200 day in quite some time. So got to take care there. Not saying it's going to do, you know, the broader indices is going to do what Google does, but when you have a huge channel like this, okay, with lots of people or institutions accumulating in a break below, will be hard for the overall markets to ignore. On the opposite side, Amazon's acting somewhat well. You know, hung in there, another inside day. This is, I guess, on the semi-constructive camp in high beta tech land, where it's tight. You know, hold on. If something were to give you a little bit of upside with the market, you would think that, you know, you had your holding here. It's, you know, a little getting tight in there at some point. Maybe if it were to, if the market wanted to go higher, this would be a vehicle, but we're not sure yet if the market's going higher. But ultimately, above the 8 and 21-day tight, I'm long small. Maybe if it gets above 718 and the market wants to go, this is something that can go. Facebook, we had a great trade early on, and then, high of the day is 11 o'clock again. Yesterday did the same thing. Having a hard time here. Okay, still in the slower area. Last time we had a really constructive pattern was when it broke this symmetrical triangle to the downside. Well before that, that jobs report or whatever that was, the LinkedIn scenario. So anyway, this is when it broke the moving averages. Another topping tail. So hard to really figure out what to do next year, except for I'm flatted overnight because not sure. On the intraday, gave you a quick move, with the news of Instagram and some of the positive talk. But again, was short-lived. Did the same thing the prior day, but here was a quick move up. A lot of us grabbed it here, made good money. Okay, then on this pull-in, bought a little bit more, and then while I was at lunch, I got stopped out through here, and now whatever. It's just choppy. Oil, we talked about buying the USO. I didn't, but oil and the banks kind of held the market in there. Oil to me still looks decent. If the market's going to go, you probably need oil to hit, 54 at some point in the next, couple sessions. Not saying couple, but at some point, 54 versus 46. Well, here is your inside action in the USO. 200 days right there. I know we have another, oil number coming soon, but ultimately, oil is acting, well, and could see a little bit more higher prices. XLE woke up today. That was a sector for some relative strength. A little red dog reversal when it reclaimed the moving averages and took this back. My note, I talked about buying this area. Hopefully some of you did that. Then there's some little guys that are popping up, and people are like, Red Dog, you're reaching. I'm starting to use some filters because my stocks just are not breaking out. There's no 52-week highs. They're very choppy. So maybe there's some stuff with some volume. So guys are like, why are you in this IMMR? I don't know. Just had a kind of decent move at the end of the day. Stock's been, annihilated. From 14, whatever. I shouldn't probably even be showing it. And then you had some other little oil guys. These frackers, right, or whatever these things are. And it's not even a fracker, but this stock was as high as 150, and now, it's trying to hang in there. For what looks to be like it could be another move. There's a big short interest here. There's also some talk of a secondary coming, so hopefully it doesn't happen tonight. We'll see what happens. Woke up here. We played that nerve that actually didn't really work. Had a little bit of a move, but still hanging out there. Let's go back to the names we know, which are like some of the banks. J.P. Morgan rallied a little bit today. Just some inside action, I guess. It's holding this spot, which is semi-constructive. If you guys are looking for a little red dog reversal, it did take back 62.34 for a trade. Some of the other banks did kind of the same thing, but not much to hang your hat on there, just hanging in there and broken. So, at this point, I feel like, Chris to my right, I'm just not being on you, but, I've watched his P&L go up and down the same amount of money 4 different times throughout the course of the day because there's been no traction. Maybe there becomes traction on Thursday into Friday. At this point, you have bios weak and you have Russell kind of weak. You have technology trying to hang in there. The S&P is having some inside action. The oil's acting better. Metals have been under pressure. The GLD tried to hold in yesterday and failed today. This outside day tested the patience of 2 up days to then get you more downside. Tomorrow we'll see whether or not maybe it's buyable into this spot. The TLTs, which also a little bit more fluid, gave you that topping tail, on right here. So at least, this tends to at least give you fluidity. Like here's your topping tail, here's your down move, gap, boom. Yesterday I talked about if you were short, maybe cover some. If you didn't cover yesterday, maybe covering a little bit here. But all in all, every time the bonds have had a high, it's come on the back of like some kind of outside move. Outside move, downside. Outside move, downside. Outside move, downside. So at least, it's not giving you misdirectional moves, but into here we'll see what happens next if it holds. Just in conclusion, some divergences. Netflix, some guys made money short there. Amazon hanging in there. Facebook, you had to take your trades. Google, still weak. Apple had an up day, but it's hard to trust. S&P giving you a little bit of, or the S&P cash giving you a little bit of digestion above 2075. We'll see if that continues. And overseas had a big rally. The DAX up 4% in 2 sessions. So tomorrow we might wake up in the morning and you can have a little bit of profit taking there, which might put a little bit of pressure on our futures. And then we've had 2 gap ups the past 2 days. So I wouldn't be just playing for a gap up. So whatever you're long today, have a little bit of commitment to, because tomorrow maybe there's a little morning weakness. We shall see. And I'll see you tomorrow. We'll figure it out. We'll keep connecting the dots and expect less, and maybe something pleasantly surprises us. Have a good one.